Hey everyone. Today we have a talk about creating companies where people thrive. Welcome to Invincible Innovation Live Show. I'm so glad that you're here. I'm Mazor, product innovation and value creation expert, and I'll be your host. And today I have a very special guest. Hi Heather.
Hi, thanks for having me.
I'm so happy that you're here. Heather Polivka is the CEO and advisor at HeatherPSolutions.
Yes.
And I'm sure it's going to be like a really interesting talk. We're live on LinkedIn, YouTube, and Facebook, and you're so invited to ask this question and join the discussion. So now we can start. So I know that you're working with so many companies, and I know that you see some kind of a gap consistently within companies. So tell me more about that.
Yeah, what's interesting is the gap is very consistent, and it was the gap that existed pre-pandemic, but we're seeing people kind of lower their tolerance level for the gap. And the gap that I see is the gap between who a company says they are, and in some cases they believe they are, or the leaders believe they are, excuse me, and the actual lived experience that employees have within the organization. So it's kind of like if we were to buy a product and they say it does all these amazing, wonderful things, and then you get it home and it's like, wah, wah, it doesn't maybe quite do what it says it does, or it does it in a way, but not in the way it was you kind of understood it to be. And what's tough is you can take a product back to the store to return it. I think that's what we're seeing with the great resignation or the great reshuffle, or however we want to term it, is employees saying, I want to get what I authentically signed up for, because the relationship between employer and employee is just that, it's a relationship. And so when there's a gap between who we say we are and how it's experienced, that almost occurs as though we're not being authentic in the relationship.
Yeah, I totally understand what you're saying. It seems like companies invest lots of time in thinking about their brand and values and think that will work really well for customers and for potential employees, but it's so hard to really sustain it afterwards. And and how do you go from these like big words and values to something which is daily? And that's one question. And the second one is, what do you think about this great resignation? So how do you think it's like turned into this really big trend?
Yeah. Um, okay. So the first thing, how does it become sort of alive and real? I think it's a really good point of seeing words on a website that are the values, but is that really the reality inside? And what's interesting about that is that work gets done, but then it never the hard work, because the easy work, and I work in branding and that too, the easy work um, is coming up with the brand. The easy work is saying this is what our mission, our values are going to be. The hard work is putting it into practice, as you pointed to. And if you think about it, we're seeing that continue to play out right now as companies spend much more money on attracting talent than they're spending on retaining talent. So again,
Sure.
doing the thing like the easy quick fix versus the hard work, which actually produces a sustainable solution and a sustainable business result. So, one of the things that is most often missing in companies that I go into is once they've said these are the values, most companies, and I mean literally 95% of companies, miss the work of defining those values in terms of behaviors. These are the behaviors we're going to reward. These are the behaviors that, might be acceptable, but these are the ones we're not going to tolerate. And that definition of the behaviors is really important, because you can get one leader leading the value of innovation like it's a competitive Lord of the Flies exercise, and another leader in that same organization leading innovation with this idea of like, no, let's bring some customers to the table and diverse perspectives and point of view and make this collaborative where we full contact dialogue and the best ideas put together will win. Those are both a route to innovation. I know that you and I would argue one is better than the other,
Yeah.
um, but if we don't define the behaviors, how do you hold the leaders to account for leading innovation in the way that you want it to flourish within your organization, you can't. So that's like the trickle down effect of not defining those behaviors, is then you can't hold people accountable to them. And then you end up with subcultures in different pockets of the organization. And then you have this inconsistent experience, and that starts to really break down the overall experience for the company. So I would say that most often it's doing that definition work and then allowing room for all of us to grow and develop into the new definition, but holding us accountable if we do not. And that is what is missing. I think that answered the first question.
Yeah, I have another. We'll go back to the Great Resignation because I'm really trying to understand that. But I want to tell you that usually when we're talking about behaviors in business, we usually hear, the very extreme use cases of misbehaving. We don't really hear much about how we should do things, more about how we shouldn't, right?
Yes,
And,
yeah.
and it's so important.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, exactly. I got so excited about that point because that's why when I work with companies to define behaviors, I actually put them into 3 buckets, not just 2. One is, these are the buckets we really want to advocate and reward and elevate and highlight. These are the behaviors that'll be tolerated, but they're not necessarily, they're acceptable, but they're not the things that we're going to